many of you remember, but we are doing a series in this church, Letter to the Churches in Revelation, the 7 churches in Revelation. And today I am going to do this church that was known as Sardis. Now, before I do that, how many of us know the difference between reputation and reality? You know, sometimes we hear a reputation, something is reputable, something is known to be really, really good, and you want to try it, you want to lay your hands on it. And the first thing, when I was thinking about this, first thing that came to me was the Dubai chocolate. We went through a season where we were all wanting to lay our hands on this thing that was Dubai chocolate, and we were told there is nothing more wonderful, more amazing than this Dubai chocolate. It was being sold at very high prices, people had hiked the price, and we all wanted to try it. I don't know about you, but I did try it a little bit after the fad has gone, because I'm not paying full, very exorbitant prices for it, and there was nothing amazing about it. I have a young child. When he was younger, there was this whole thing about a prime drink. So it was a bottle of some kind of liquid, questionable, and at one point it was being sold in Sainsbury's for 23 quid. It's about £1 now. Yes, exactly. And Sam wanted desperately to have it, and we saved money for it. I didn't pay 23 quid, but we did pay something like £5-7 for a bottle of drink, which was just flavored water. I think his passion died out as quickly as it happened, because it tasted not very, good. But what I'm trying to say here is, when something has a reputation, you're attracted towards it. You want to try it. You want to be in the know of this thing, whatever it is. Now, coming to Sardis, I always want to know the background of what I'm trying to speak on, and I looked up Sardis. Sardis is a church. Currently, that area is in Turkey. I don't know why all the areas is in Turkey. I think we should go to Turkey as a church. Pastor, take note. So Sardis is an ancient city in modern-day Turkey right now. It was the capital of the ancient kingdom of Lydia, known for its wealth and as a center of trade. In fact, the first gold and silver coins were minted in Sardis. When they decided they were not bartering with oil or salt or whatever, they minted the first coins in this area. So you can imagine, for trade purposes, this area was very popular. It is also famous for the Acropolis and the temple of Artemis. So this is like the Greek gods, pagan gods. They built temples for them. By the time the early Christian church was established, Sardis had experienced a decline but remained a significant urban center. So by the time Christianity spread to these areas, Sardis, or the Church of Sardis, was no longer that popular on fire, but it still remained the center of trade. Now, the location of this church is also very important, and I'll come to tell you why it is important a little bit later on, but I'll tell you how it was located. So this church, Sardis, or this city, was in western Turkey. Right now, it is approximately 50 miles east of Izmir and about 60 miles inland from Ephesus. Stephen Hayden, they've been to Ephesus just this summer. So this is a very central area. It is situated overlooking the Hermus Valley and along the Pactus River in the Manisa province. So whenever a city that was impregnable, that couldn't be conquered, was established, it was common sense. They built it on a hill, so people couldn't easily access it. And normally, probably in England and other places, there used to be a moat, isn't it? They would dig it deep. Not only would they place it high on a hill, they would also dig deep so that people couldn't just swim across for a holiday and reach the city. But here, there was a natural river that flowed around it. So it was packed tight. It was secure. And it was affluent, but also what is said. So we are talking about thousands of years ago. It says here, the city was morally lax. It was a little bit loosey-goosey. Environment was influenced, and the spiritual condition of the church contributed to its outward appearance of vitality. They like to do stuff. They like to do things. They like to do projects, and they like to have events. So they were popular. We'll come to it later on. Sardis, it says here, was a perfect model of inoffensive Christianity. Now, growing up, when I grew up, I was very much into Enid Blyton. And I was a reader, I would read a lot, and I used to read a lot of Enid Blyton books. But when I grew up a little bit older, I realized that some of the characters were being wiped out of Enid Blyton. Some of the characters you couldn't, because they were used as racial slurs, they were used to say things to people that were not very comely. But equally, we started becoming, and very especially in the West, we started becoming politically correct. We wouldn't call a spade a spade. If I asked you to bring a spade today, I couldn't ask you, go and get a spade. I would say to you, go and get that thing which has got the handle made out of wood with a little fat, because we can't say things now no more. We can't say things. You can't say to a child, I'm going to smack your bottom in a minute if you're not sitting on your bottom. You can't say that. And more we are becoming politically correct. So we'll come back to the inoffensive Christianity. Now, Revelation 3, this story about Sardis, is found in Revelation 3. It's a very short reference. It's only got 6 verses 1 to 6. And what we'll do is we'll take each verse very quickly and we'll go through it. Now, in the very first verse, this is Jesus, and he's instructing John. John wrote the book of Revelation, and this is Jesus speaking. So it's in the first person. Jesus says, "These are the words of him who holds the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars." So Jesus himself is now introducing who he is. We know he's the Alpha and Omega. He is the Son of God. He is incarnate, and he is the one. He's also saying that he is the one who is holding these 7 stars. In the Bible, and if you know, the 7 is a number of perfection. 7 is God's number. 7 days he took to make heaven and earth. So 7 is God's number. So Jesus himself is introducing now. And remember, he is addressing 7 churches. All right? He's speaking to these 7 churches, and he knows these churches individually. You know, sometimes we hear of these churches, but we don't know them. We haven't been. So if somebody says, "Oh, do you know such and such church?" And we'll be like, "Oh, I've heard good things. I haven't been, I don't know." But Jesus is saying he is perfect. He is the perfect one. Remember what he says in the next line. He says, this is the first verse continuing, second part, "I know your deeds. You have a reputation of being alive, but you are dead." Imagine meeting somebody for the very first time, and they call you out. You wouldn't want to see them ever again. Yeah? "Oh, I know you. You are useless." "Oh, thanks, mate. I'm not staying here 1 minute." Jesus here is saying to the church, he's addressing the church, and he says, "I know you. I am perfect. I know everything, and I know you. You are alive. You look alive, but you are dead inside." It's not very nice. If you read letters to the other churches, God first of all encourages them, "Oh, you are really good. You've done well, but this is bad about you." Here, he tells them, "You are dead." Second verse says, "Wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die, for I have found your deeds unfinished in the sight of my God." So he's telling them straight away to wake up. Now, wake up here is actually a call to pay attention, be vigilant. Why it is vigilant is, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." So the enemy is trying to catch you. The enemy is trying to take you out of God's hands. The enemy is actually looking to pull you away from where you want to be. If you are with Christ and if you are safe and home, do not become complacent. And this is something that we as churches do very well. Once we are home and dry, once we are established in a church, once we like a church and we settle down, then we start relaxing. It is the equivalent of coming in from work and taking your shoes on. And in the summer, putting your shorts on. You know, home shorts? We all have that set of clothes that the minute we wear them, we are home. We are relaxed. We want to eat something. We want to chill. We want to sit in front of the fan, etc. That is coming home. That is becoming complacent. That is becoming a little bit relaxed and not worried what's going to happen. But Jesus is warning here the church to say, do not become complacent, do not become relaxed, do not start thinking, I'm home, I'm going to heaven, I don't care who is coming, who isn't, but I've made it, I've got the badge, I'm wearing the t-shirt, I'm good to go. You see, sometimes the external appearances is not what is on the inside. I don't know how many of you are eating chocolate through the summer. I am. But you know when you buy chocolate in this heat, it looks like a perfect bar. It looks like fully formed. And once you take the wrapper off, you will find it's become softened. It's not yet melted, but it's on the way. And when you eat it, it's not the same. Yeah, when we go to India and we want to take sweets for children, we tend to not take chocolates because they melt and they're not going to be the same. But on the wrapper, it looks fine. If you go into a corner shop or a supermarket today, you will find that the shelves are laden with these chocolates that look perfectly fine. But when you start holding them, you will realize they are softened, they've become soft. Now, activity and reputation. See, there are two things that hide things. The first one is activity. Not taking any names, but I have somebody in the office I used to work with. This person had every look on their face of being really busy. So what they did was they would walk from one office to the next. They would pick something up, they would put it down, they would take it to the other room, they would go to the printer, they would look through the papers that was being printed, because different people, we shared a printer. They would be constantly on the move. And I used to think, wow, they are working so hard. And every time they came to give an extra job, nobody would give this person a job because, oh, she was doing enough already. So she had the look of being really busy. But at the end of the day, quite often she would pass her job, her work to other people. Oh, I couldn't get to finish this. You had all day to do this work, and yet you didn't finish, yet you were so busy. She had the look of being really busy. The second thing is reputation. You know, you might have heard somebody is an amazing cook, an amazing singer, an amazing musician, and you are going, yay, I've got the tickets, or I've got to see this person. They're amazing. And then you taste their food, or you listen to their music, and you think, I don't know what happened there. I don't know. You know what? Very recently, growing up, and the youngsters might not know this name, but growing up, we were crazy after Ricky Martin. Yeah, Ricky Martin. Some of the people are laughing, yes. Ricky Martin. Now, Ricky Martin is on tour at the moment, and he was in Istanbul. And I was like, I remember Ricky Martin being really, on fire, moving, amazing singing. There was a clip, social media, there was a clip of him singing. And I thought he was trying to kill some cats. It sounded terrible. And I thought, Ricky Martin, I couldn't imagine he was that bad. Oh, but when we were younger, oh my goodness, he was amazing. And I thought, what happened? Now, something might really have happened, and he's become old, and we don't think our superstars become old. But, oh my goodness, I was like, either I was crazy when I was younger, or something really drastically wrong has happened to Ricky Martin. So, good thing is, I'm not buying those tickets and spending money to go and see him while he's on tour. I did go and see Bryan Adams, and he was amazing, so highly recommend him. So reputation means sometimes things are not quite what it seems. But many times, because you have a reputation, it carries you. The same goes with churches. Sometimes you have a good reputation, but inside you are dead. Inside there is nothing. You may be putting up events. You may be having annual events all the year round. You are doing something or the other. Have you seen some churches? I wouldn't take any names, but there is one church I'm really impressed with right now. Is it a church? I don't know. But the community service that they're doing is really lovely. And I keep screenshotting them and sending it to Pastor Dan. We should do this. We should do this. Probably he hasn't taken up the bait yet. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes churches put on a lot of events. You as a church start thinking, when will my church do this? I don't have a summer fair. I don't have this. I don't have a Christmas event like they do. Really, really like some churches. And some churches are really doing an amazing work. But some churches are not quite what it seems like. And today we have to sit here and think, are we one of those churches? So this letter that was written to a church in Turkey by John, inspired by Jesus Christ, wasn't for that particular generation, wasn't for that particular church. It is contemporary. How many of us know that the Bible is true today as it was 2,000 years ago? So we're not going there. We're not going to wonder about all those things. But what we are saying right now is we're going to apply it to ourselves and see if there is need of any cleansing, improvement, or, we can do something better. We, as Bethel, have got an amazing, amazing reputation. In 2030, our church is going to be 100 years old. Some of you might think, oh my goodness, do I look that old? I'm not going to say that, your pastor might, but 100 years old, 2030, we need to put that date in our diary. Our church is amazing. When I came to this church 7 years ago, and I looked at the history of Bethel, the amazing photographs, the amazing people. It used to be full to the rafters, people wanting to come inside. There was a music band as big as the congregation. The Sunday school was bigger than the congregation. The amazing thing, there are here many people who came to this church as children, and they have grown into this church and stayed in this church and are here now. And that is an amazing thing for a church. Many churches, the whole congregation gets changed every year, annual like Exodus, and they have a new congregation every year. But this church has a reputation. This church does put events. We do events. We do good things in the community. We do good things in the church. So we are a good church. But are we there where Christ wants us to be, is the question today. Now, Sardis was on trade, manufacturing, philosophy. The Greek philosopher Thales lived there. The city was home to various people of knowledge, of wisdom. To the outside world, Sardis looked strong, cultured, and full of life. It looked like the place to be, the place everything was happening. And the church in Sardis reflected the same outward appearance. From the outside, it seemed active and vigilant. But Jesus, remember, is the one who sees past the surface and into the heart. He had no praise for them. I don't know what Jesus would say if he came today to church and spoke to us. He is here. But if he spoke to us the truth in 6 lines, and he told us what he thinks about us, I don't know if he's going to say, my good and faithful servant, I'm very pleased. Or is he going to say, you are dead? Because he says to Sardis, he gives a diagnosis, he says, you have a reputation of being alive, but you are dead. When Jesus rode on the donkey last time to come into Jerusalem, he went to the temple. And in Matthew 23, verse 27 and 28, addresses the learned men, the people who were scribes, who were Pharisees. He spoke to them. And what he said to these people, now these people are people of reputation. He said, woe to you, teachers of the law, and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside, you appear as people, as righteous, but on the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. We may carry a good reputation. People might think about you that you are really, really learned. You are really, really a good Christian. And then, not deliberately, but unconsciously, subconsciously, you talk behind somebody's back. You speak to a third person about an issue that might be good, might be right, but instead of coming and speaking to the pastor, you speak to the person on the side. That is gossip. And God doesn't like gossip. Or maybe you do something that is not comely of what people think of you. And you're not deliberately trying to be mean or horrible, but you just do it without thinking. What's happened there? You become complacent. Like the people of Sardis, like the church in Sardis, you think you have a good reputation. People know you as a Christian. You may be a Christian for 3 generations. Your fathers, your forefathers, they've served the ministry. You've been a missionary. You've been outside. You've been to countries nobody would go. You've done things that nobody would do. And yet, you are not what Christ wants you to be. Today is the day to check. You know, the thing that stood out in the scripture was whitewashed tombs, gravestones, tombs. They are white and clean on the outside, but inside they've got decay. They've got bones of dead people. Are we like that as a church or as individuals? We look beautiful on the outside, and people think very highly of us, but deep inside, it's time for housekeeping. It's time to check what is dead. Do you know what? God can revive what is dead. God can bring back to life. You know what? Jesus, he rose up from the dead. So if there's anything dead, do not worry, because God can bring it back to life, and we'll come to it in a minute. This call is urgent, because God says in verse 2, strengthen what remains and is about to die. There might be little embers inside of you. Bring it back to life. And then verse 3 says, remember therefore what you have received and heard, hold it fast and repent. But if you do not, wake up. I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what time I come to you. Remember the dream I had, and I shared that dream with you. I had the dream that just out of nowhere, Jesus came back. And my friend, Sam's godmother, was getting very excited. And there were thousands of people out on the streets. The sun had become dimmer, and there was an atmosphere of trembling, of dread, of excitement. And my friend says, oh, Anna, we're going home. And there I was thinking, am I going to make it? And that made me think, how many of us are thinking the same thing? Or how many of us are thinking falsely that we will make it and we won't? Oh my goodness, my name is at the top of the book. You know, even if it's in alphabetical order, I'm going first. I'm at the first of the queue. I'm sorted. I'm a really good Christian. Remember that story where Jesus says the first one who has not sinned may throw that stone to the adulterous woman. How many of us here think we don't sin? How many of us think that we are okay? We're sorted. I'm a good Christian. You are bad. Sometimes, you know, the word comes, like today, the word isn't very, very pleasant when it comes out. You always think it's for the one next to you. Every time some word goes out about naughty people, I always think it's for my husband. Because that's what we think as wives. We think, goodness knows, you know, they need to improve because they need a lot of work doing. So Christ is calling them to strengthen what is left. Somewhere, and I was reading, there is a mention of these rituals. You know, there used to be guilds in those times, like trading bodies, guilds, and you have to be a member to trade. So like here in the UK, we have got various organizations, like we've got one for the ambulance service, and we've got one for the doctors and for the nurses and for the tradesmen. And you have to be a member. You are given an official number, and you cannot trade without that. Similarly, in Sardis at that time, there was a guild. And one of the things that they did in the guild, they used to do pagan worship. They used to do rituals that weren't Christian. But do you know what the amazing thing was? Jews were exempt from it. Jews didn't have to worship their gods. They knew the Jews worshiped Jesus. They knew the Jews were different. So while the others were worshiping their Greek gods and goddesses, they didn't ask the Jews to do it. And do you know what Jews did? They did it anyway, because they wanted to be kind, like we do. We do some of the things that are dodgy, don't we, church? Sometimes we participate because we don't want to upset people. Sometimes we allow things because we don't call out wrong that is wrong. India has had a massive student revolution recently. If you have heard in the news or if you have been paying attention, there has been terrible, terrible crimes against students. And these students came onto the streets, and about 30, 40 days they've been fasting unto death, and there's been a revolution. And this morning, before I came to church, I heard this man and his pastor. Now, Indians are minority not Indians, Christians are minority in India, and there is almost atrocities. They are a persecuted faith. So I heard this young lad, and he said that, our reputation as Christians is that we are a peace-loving lot. We don't participate in revolutions. We don't attack. We don't fight. We don't do anything. We just sit at home and pray. And he called out his pastor, who was a young man himself, and he said, "Pastor, why are you here?" And the pastor was there with the Indian flag joining the students. And the pastor said, "You know what? There is a time for everything. We worship a God who loves justice. And sometimes you have to stand up for justice. And standing up for justice means that as a Christian, you are doing something that people do not accord to you because Christians are weak." Sometimes I have heard people of other faith say Christians don't defend their God. And actually, I believe that as well. I believe that our God doesn't need us to defend. Our God will defend himself. But do we stand up for our faith? Do we take a stand? And we don't have to go out into the news, into the media, or bash people's head to say I'm a Christian. But do we make a stand in our house? Are we telling our children, I'm just making this up, there's nothing wrong, to say no sleepover in my house? Or my child doesn't go for sleepovers, are we? And that child might say, "Oh, but mommy," but I don't know who's going to be there in the other person's house. I'm not going to let my child go attended when he was young. I will not let him go attended to the boys' washroom, the boys' toilets, because he's alone. He's a small child. Oh, but, we're living in a world that is perverse. There was all kind of sexual immorality happening in these guilds celebrations. And people, Jews, were actually attending them. Remember the term we found at the beginning? Inoffensive Christianity? Do you know what is inoffensive Christianity? Not Christianity. If you're not offending 3 people daily as a Christian, then you are not a Christian. If you're getting along with everybody and everybody loves you and you're not stepping on anybody's toes, my pastor used to say there's something wrong with you. If the enemy is not chasing you because you are no longer a threat to the enemy. The minute you stand up, this is a promise. The minute you make a stand and you say, "This Wednesday, I'm going to have a prayer meeting in my house," I promise you, your roof will collapse. Because the enemy comes after you. And if the enemy is not coming after you, that means that you are no longer a threat to the enemy. The enemy is thinking, he's on my team. He's dressed as a Christian, but he's actually mine. He's my family member. One of the things that happened to Sardis got taken down, was attacked twice, and twice the enemy conquered. Now, the description says that Sardis was not only built on a hill, it ramparts, the fort walls, were 1,500 feet long. My maths is bad, and my estimation is even badder. So you can determine how tall is 1,500 feet. And on top of that were then soldiers who were watching. Now, technically, they should see an army coming around, isn't it? And there's a river to cross as well. In 546 BC, the Persian ruler Cyrus launched a surprise attack against Sardis under the cover of the night, scaling the cliffs of the city's citadel and taking the city. The same tactic, and I'll tell you what it is, the same tactic was used by Antiochus the Great in 2014 BC, and that's when it tells you, "If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know what hour I will come against you." Jesus says that in verse 3. So the trick that they used, both the conquerors used, what they did was they watched. And they watched that there, in between the ramparts were these places, at the folds of the palace walls, where it curved. They realized that one of the soldiers' hat had fallen down. It had fallen down, and he didn't care. He didn't take notice of it. That's where the enemy climbed from. And would you believe it? The enemy not only climbed, it must have taken him a fair bit of time climbing up 1,500 feet. He not only climbed up 1,500 foot, he actually went down and opened the front gates. Can you imagine? Not only did he impregnate the impregnable city, he actually opened the front gate. They didn't have to fight. They didn't have to break down. They actually walked into Sardis. Can you believe? Everybody was so complacent. My city is actually secure. Nobody can come here. Remember the river, remember the hill, remember 1,500 feet of walls, remember the soldiers on top. And this person actually walks and opens the front gate. And remember, the city gates in those days used to be big and massive and strong, and it took so many people to open it. Guess what? They opened it and entered. But they didn't learn their lesson. From 546 BC, when they were conquered first, they got conquered again in 214 BC. So it wasn't like, are we like that sometimes when we learn a lesson? When something happens to us and we are like, oh God, I will read my Bible every day. I promise you I will get up in the morning and I will pray. And God, I love you. And God, oh God, I'm so tired today. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Yeah, we've all done it. Till we get a wake-up call again. We are conquered again. Somebody comes after us and we are like, oh Lord, save us this time. Just save us this time. And next time, I promise you. Oh, there's a match, Lord. I'm praying for this country. I'm praying for England. I want England to win. We did pray for England, and England did very well, but that's besides the point. The point I'm making here is that sometimes we become complacent like Sardis did. And Jesus says, you will not know what time I come, and I'll take you by surprise. I don't know whether you think like that or not, but I definitely think that I have got a lot of time. I've got time, I'll sort it out. I'm going to sort my prayer life. I'm going to sort my church life. I'm going to sort my family. I'm going to sort my finances. I'm going to sort everything. My health routine, summer health, winter health, whatever. I'm going to do it. But it doesn't happen because we are very complacent. Verse 4, we're about to finish soon. Verse 4 says, yet you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. What he's saying is not everybody's bad in a church. Not everybody's horrible. There are a few people, and there is a reward for them. Remember, in most of the letters, Jesus starts off as appreciating them and tells them what they need to correct. Here, the correction has come first because the correction needs to happen because sin was rampant in the church. And then he applauds the few people who are faithful. And he says, they will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. Taking 5 with the 4, the one who is victorious will, like them, be dressed in white. So the ones who are good will be rewarded, but those who win victory over their sin. Now that sin could be any bad habit to actually killing somebody. How many of us know that a sin is a sin? There is no little sin and big sin. Oh, I only say those swear words, but I haven't killed anybody yet. You are not the one to judge which sin is greater and which is lesser. God is the judge. So, if you turn your life around today, as a church, as an individual, you will be victorious like those who are still faithful in that church, and you will be dressed in white. I will never blot out the name of that person from the book of life. Jesus himself takes responsibility of that, and he will acknowledge them, that name, before my Father and his angels. Jesus is promising that your name, if you repent, if you change, will be in that book of life, and he will acknowledge you to his Father and his angels. And then in the end, he says, whatever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now, you would say, we all have ears, don't we? How many of us know that sometimes we may have the ears attached, but we're not using them? But quite often in Sunday school, I will say, have you brought your ears with you to use, or are they for decorative purposes? It is more probably for us as adults than for children. Are these ears for decorative purposes, or are they to be used? But if you are using them, then hear, pay attention to what God is saying. Now, it says here, let me tell you what are the naughty things they did. They said, if you do not wake up, Jesus says he comes like a thief. Jews were held under high status in Sardis, remember I told you? And also under the Roman rule. They were granted the right to practice their faith openly and were excluded from worshipping idols and participation in the Caesar cult. Those days they used to worship whoever was the king, because why not? Jews were not asked to do that. The Jews of Sardis had one of the largest synagogues in the ancient world that could hold over 1,000 people. 9 of its donors were on the city council, making the Jewish population an important part in the city. You know, when England was formed, when England was England, it was a Christian country. And there's no harm in saying we are a Christian family. We honor you if you are a person of another faith. We honor you because Jesus loved everybody. Jesus didn't die for just us Christians. He died for the sinners. He died for people who rejected him. He died for the people who condemned him to death. He died for the soldiers who put him on that cross. He died for everybody. But are you upholding your faith, your walk, the fact that you have been set aside by Jesus differently, or have you mingled with everybody and become one of them? Now, I am really, really good, at making juice. You know, squash? Ever since Sam was little, I have marveled at mums who will pour a certain portion, whether it's in a jug, whether it's in a cup, they will pour a certain portion, put water in it, and hand it over to the child. I have to taste it 10 times. Sometimes it is too weak. Sometimes it is too strong, so I have to add a little water. The problem is, sorry, Wayne. The problem is, the more water you add to your faith, the more weak it'll become. Yeah? There is a celebration in the city about one of the things the church doesn't agree with. But I'll go anyway because they are our brothers and sisters. They are our brothers and sisters. You can love on them another time. Don't go and become a part of something you don't agree with. My children are doing something wrong. I'm not going to tell them they are wrong because I love them. I won't reject them. No, God is not asking you to reject them. God is asking you to tell them right from wrong. That is what a parent's job is. And if they still do wrong, you say, I'm here, and I love you, and I'll wait if you need me. I'm right here. Don't go and join them. Don't water down your faith. Now, how do we take a lesson from this church of Sardis and stop becoming Sardis 2.0? The first one is to remember your first love. You know, Revelation 2 verse 4 says, "Yet I hold this against you. You have forgotten the love you had first." It would be a good day today to find out why you became a Christian. It could be that you come from a Christian family and your parents brought you to church as a child and you have just continued. Or maybe you had an encounter with Jesus. Maybe you were out in the world and one day suddenly God encountered you and you fell in love with Jesus and you are here. No matter whatever the reason, have you become complacent today? Have you become like that watchman on the tower who didn't even realize the enemy has come in and their walls have been breached and they are not even attacking. They're actually walking in because somebody has opened the door from the inside. You know what? The enemy will only come inside if you open that door. And sometimes we open that door. We ourselves invite the enemy in and say, come on in, because you're my friend, aren't you? Because we want to be everybody's friend. We want everybody to like us because we want to water down our Christianity. We want to water down our faith till it is no longer recognizable. When you became a Christian, people recognized you. When you walked into a room, people said, there's something different about this person. I will not swear in front of this person. And later on, it didn't matter because, hey, we became one of them because we wanted to be acceptable in the workplace, in our offices, in our homes, and in different places. We need to repent, guys. We need to repent today. We need to repent, not tomorrow, not another day, not I'll think about it, I'll pray about it, today is the day. You will find out what is wrong and you will make it right. Do you know, have you heard that phrase? You do you, and I'll do me. What it means is, this is my version of Christianity. This is my version of who I am. You have your version and I will have my version. I'll honor your version and you honor my version, and it doesn't matter what the Bible says. And if that is you today, I tell you, you are more out than you are in. You are on your way out because there is only one version in the Bible, and that is the truth. Jesus kept it very basic. The first thing is realization. The second thing is repenting. And the third thing is walking that straight line. You have to remember that first love, you have to recommit, and you have to walk that line. And Jesus says he will himself write your name in the book of life, and he will not blot it out, and he will praise you in front of his Father. Do you know the good thing about this letter? Sardis actually ended up becoming back to where it was in the coming. From the 2nd century to the 11th century, Sardis was the center of Christianity. Do you know what? Those people, that letter that was written wasn't just waste. People took note of it, people changed, and from 2nd to the 11th century, Sardis again became the center of the Christian world because people took heed. Romans 12 verse 2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." So I'm giving you this opportunity today. Like the people of Sardis, let's do an MOT. Let's find out. This letter, let's not say it was written for those 1,000 years ago, for those naughty people. I'm perfect, God. I don't need any changing or chiseling or making better. I'm fine. I'm perfect. So please go home with this thought. If you need to speak to somebody, leadership will be here. Come. If you need prayer, come and see us, and we will pray with you. Now I'd like to invite Michelina, because I think she's got something.